Hello and welcome to this edition of Take 5 with Tony on this beautiful October day in Southwest Virginia. 20 years ago, Bill Clinton signed into law NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. About that same time, the first genetically engineered food crops started to enter our food system and marketplaces. Now, over the past 20 years, although our food and ag policy and our so-called trade policy have got many differences in their details, much about them has also overlapped, and they've both had profound and far-reaching consequences on our economy, our communities, and our workers. As I've looked at them more and more, I've started to see this overlap in four particular areas that I'm going to talk about. And when I look at it all together, it seems to me that they come together in what I'm calling Roundup Ready Trade policy. Now, first of all, both the ag and biotech policy and our foreign trade policy take a scorched earth approach where collateral damage is just, well, something you got to live with. In the case of our genetically engineered crops, nearly 3/4 of all the acreage of GMO crops includes herbicide resistance or Roundup Ready crops. And the consequences of that have been profound, not only in reducing the biodiversity on farms and increasing tremendously the dependence on herbicides, but also in profound impacts on soil microbiology, on the microbes that we need to keep our farms and our food healthy. In a similar way, our trade policy has led to destruction of many, many downtowns. The collateral damage is being businesses and manufacturers whose work has gone overseas, small businesses and whole communities where the downtown center is boarded up and people flee from other opportunities. It's a scorched earth collateral damage approach. Secondly, we've seen a favoring of the big monoculture approach over the small and diverse approach. Again, with genetically engineered seeds costing nearly twice as much, and with the margins being more slim, farmers tend to plant just one crop on huge acreage, thousands of acres. And that monoculture approach hurts not only the health of the farm ecosystem, but makes the farmer more vulnerable to commodity prices for their corn or soybeans. As opposed to a diversified small farm that not only has more ecological systems in balance, but has less risk for the farmer as they have more eggs in their basket. Our trade policy has done the same thing. We've relied on a handful of huge international corporations, both in manufacturing but especially in retail, trade, and banking. And those have been favored tremendously over the small and mid-sized businesses, the local and the independent, the cooperatively owned, all of which contribute more to the health of local economy. Third, when things have gone wrong, when they've gone south, rather than reflect and maybe change course, in both our ag and trade policy, we've doubled down and doubled up. What have we done when we found herbicide resistance on more than half of all the farms in our country, super weeds emerging as a result of too much herbicide? Instead of changing course, we're now looking at genetically engineered crops that have resistance not only to Roundup, but to 2,4-D, dicamba, and other more toxic herbicides. And similarly, in our trade policy, when we've seen what these investor settlement dispute mechanisms have done, favoring big corporations over health and well-being of communities, rather than change that, current trade negotiations like the TPP only strengthen those mechanisms in favor of big corporations, just like they strengthen the patents that favor those big guys at the top. And lastly, on top of all of that, both of them favor secrecy over transparency. With GMO crops, the big ag players are all fighting for labeling, even though nearly 90% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals, say they want to know if their food has genetically engineered ingredients. And yet they fight tooth and nail state labeling and federal labeling laws. Similarly, our trade agreements, they were conducted in relative secrecy back in Bill Clinton's day, right through to George Bush, but even more so, the current round of trade agreements have been conducted in almost complete secrecy. Why? Why is that justified? And so you see we have two different strands, two very important sets of policies, one about agriculture and food, the other about trade, and yet they seem to come together in an overlap, an unhealthy overlap that I call Roundup Ready Trade policy. I think we can change that, but it's going to take both ag advocates and trade advocates working together. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.